The fluorescent lights of the Brooklyn Social Services office buzzed like dying insects, each flicker making my head hurt worse. I clutched my stuffed rabbit, Mr. Caniglio, against my chest and watched Mama's hands shake as she tried to sign the papers the lady kept pushing toward her. "Mrs. Benedetti, I need you to initial here, and here," the social worker said, tapping her pen against the clipboard with sharp clicks that reminded me of the scary sounds in our apartment building at night. Mama's fingers trembled so badly she could barely hold the pen. I could see the yellow color in her eyes getting worse, like when milk goes bad and Mama says we can't drink it anymore. She'd been working 2 shifts at the restaurant for 3 weeks straight, and this morning she couldn't get out of bed until I brought her water. "Mama's just tired, Stellina," she whispered to me in Italian, but I knew it was a lie. I was 7, not stupid. The yellow in her eyes meant something bad, something she wouldn't tell me about. The phone on the social worker's desk rang, shrill and urgent. She answered it and I watched her face change, her eyebrows going up high. "Yes, I understand. Tonight? But yes, of course." She hung up and looked at Mama with an expression I'd seen before on grown-ups' faces when they were about to tell you something that would make you scared. "Mrs. Benedetti, I need you to listen carefully. There's been a situation at Ristorante Cesare." Mama's face went white, whiter than the papers on the desk. "Your supervisor called. You collapsed during prep. The paramedics are taking you to Brooklyn Methodist." The social worker stood up, already reaching for her jacket. "I'm going to have Sophia accompany me to the restaurant to collect your belongings and then—" "No." Mama tried to stand but swayed, grabbing the edge of the desk. "Not there. Please, not there. Sophia cannot go to that place. Mrs. Benedetti, you need medical attention immediately. Sophia will be perfectly safe. It's just a restaurant." But Mama was crying now, real tears running down her thin face, and she grabbed my shoulders so tight it hurt. "Sophia, listen to me. You don't speak. You understand? Not one word. Not Italian, not English. You're mute tonight, yes? Like when we play the quiet game?" I nodded, confused and scared by the fear in her voice. "Mrs. Benedetti, you're frightening your daughter. Promise me." Mama shook me gently, desperately. "Promise, Mama, you won't speak." "I promise," I whispered, and then Mama kissed my forehead 3 times the way she always did, and the paramedics were there with a stretcher, and everything happened so fast I couldn't keep track. 20 minutes later, I sat in the social worker's car outside the fanciest restaurant I'd ever seen. Ristorante Cesare had golden letters above the door and windows so clean they looked like they weren't even there. Through them, I could see chandeliers dripping with crystals like frozen waterfalls. "This is where your mother works?" the social worker asked, sounding surprised. I nodded. Mama worked in the kitchen, washing dishes and chopping vegetables. She always came home smelling like garlic and tomatoes, with her hands red and raw. "Well, let's make this quick. I need to get you to a temporary placement while your mother is hospitalized." The word hospitalized made my stomach hurt. I squeezed Mr. Caniglio tighter. Inside, the restaurant was even more beautiful than through the window, but it was also completely empty of regular people. No couples eating pasta, no families celebrating birthdays like I'd imagined. Instead, there were men. Lots of men. All wearing dark suits that looked too perfect, standing around like guards in the castle books at the library. A tall man with gray hair and a scar on his cheek approached us immediately. "We are closed for private event," he said with an accent like Mama's, but harder somehow. "I'm from social services. Mrs. Benedetti's supervisor called about collecting her belongings. Wait here." The scarred man walked away without another word. I looked around the restaurant, trying not to stare but unable to help it. There was a long hallway leading to the back and I could hear voices speaking Italian. The real Italian, not the simplified kind Mama used with me, but the fast, complicated Italian she spoke on the phone with Nana before Nana stopped calling 2 years ago. A younger man in a white shirt and black vest hurried past us carrying a tray with wine glasses. He was nervous, I could tell. His hands shook a little, just like Mama's, and he kept glancing toward the back hallway like he was scared of what was back there. "You can sit there," the scarred man said, returning and pointing to a small booth near the kitchen. "Someone will bring her things." The social worker checked her watch and sighed. "Fine. 15 minutes, then we're leaving." She guided me to the booth and I climbed up onto the leather seat, which was so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. Mr. Caniglio and I waited while she made phone calls, using words like emergency placement and temporary custody that made my chest feel tight. That's when it happened. The nervous waiter came rushing past our booth carrying a tray with 3 wine glasses filled with dark red wine. His foot caught on something, maybe his own shoe, maybe the edge of the rug, and he stumbled. The tray tilted and wine splashed across the white tablecloth of the booth next to ours, droplets spraying like blood. "Che cazzo," he hissed under his breath in Sicilian dialect, a bad word I'd heard in the streets of Naples before we left. Before I came to America. Before everything changed. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them, automatic as breathing in the Neapolitan Italian mama, and I spoke at home. "Si dice, che cavallo, non si dice brut parole." You say, "Che cavallo," you don't say bad words. The entire restaurant went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Like someone had pressed a pause button on the world. The social worker's head snapped toward me. The waiter's face went pale. And slowly, very slowly, I felt the weight of attention shifting in the room like a shadow turning to look at you. From the hallway leading to the private dining room, a man emerged. He was tall, with dark hair silver at the temples and a face that reminded me of the marble statues in the museum Mama took me to once, beautiful and cold and carved from stone. He wore a suit so black it seemed to drink the light, and when his eyes found me across the restaurant, I felt something I'd never felt before, recognition from a stranger. He walked toward our booth with steps that made no sound, and every man in the restaurant watched him, waiting. He stopped 3 feet from where I sat clutching Mr. Caniglio, and those dark eyes studied my face like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. "What is your name, Piccolina?" he asked in perfect Neapolitan Italian, the same dialect as mine, the same accent as the home I barely remembered. I looked at the social worker, then back at him. Mama's words echoed in my head. "You don't speak." Not one word. But I'd already broken my promise. "Sophia?" I whispered. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, recognition, maybe pain. He crouched down slowly, bringing himself to my eye level, and I could see that his eyes weren't cold at all. They were sad. Terribly, deeply sad. "Sophia Benedetti?" he said, not as a question but as a statement. I nodded. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said something that made no sense to me but would change everything. "Dio mio. You have your father's eyes." The social worker stood up. "Excuse me, sir, but this child is in my custody." He raised one hand, never taking his eyes off me, and the social worker stopped talking immediately. The power in that simple gesture was absolute. "Where is the mother?" he asked, still speaking to me in Italian. "Hospital," I answered in the same language. "She's very sick." His jaw tightened. "What is her condition?" "I don't know the English word. Her eyes are yellow. She's so tired all the time." "Icterizia," he murmured. "Jaundice." Then louder in English, "Luca." The scarred man appeared instantly at his side. "Don Moretti? Call Dr. Russo. Have him meet the ambulance at Brooklyn Methodist. Full workup, private room, whatever is needed. And find out everything about Sophia Benedetti and her mother. Everything." "Sir, you can't just," the social worker began. Don Moretti finally looked at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her take a step back. "The child's mother is gravely ill. I am ensuring she receives proper care. Unless you have a legal objection?" The social worker opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. He turned back to me, and when he spoke again his voice was softer. "Sophia, do you know who I am?" I shook my head. "My name is Vincenzo Moretti. A very long time ago I made a promise to someone I loved very much. I promised I would protect what he treasured most in this world." His hand reached out slowly, carefully, and touched the top of my head like a blessing. "I think, Piccolina, that I have been looking for you for 3 years. I didn't understand. I didn't understand any of it. But when he smiled, sad and small, I saw something in his face that I recognized. The same look Mama got when she talked about Papa. "She needs my help," he said, and I didn't know if he meant me or Mama or both. But I knew, sitting in that booth with Mr. Caniglio and the spilled wine and the silent men in their perfect suits, that the quiet game was over. And nothing would ever be the same again. The booth's leather seat was too big for me, and my feet dangled above the floor, swinging back and forth in a rhythm that helped me not think about Mama in the ambulance or the yellow in her eyes or the way she grabbed my shoulders like she was drowning and I was the only thing that could save her. Mr. Caniglio sat in my lap, his one remaining button eye staring at nothing. I'd had him since I was 3, since before Naples, since before everything got scary. Papa had won him at a carnival, Mama told me once, throwing rings onto bottles until he'd won the biggest prize for his little girl. I wasn't supposed to remember Papa, but sometimes I did. Not his face exactly, but the feeling of being safe. Of being carried on shoulders so high I could touch the clouds. Of laughter that rumbled like thunder in a chest I rested my head against. The social worker sat across from me, scrolling through her phone and making notes, mumbling about placement options and morning court hearings. Her words washed over me like water, meaningless sounds that couldn't penetrate the bubble of fear wrapped around my chest. Through the archway leading to the back dining room, I could hear voices speaking Italian. Real Italian, the kind with edges and music and meanings that shifted depending on how you said the words. Not the careful, simple Italian Mama used with me, but the language of grown-ups with secrets. A waiter emerged from the kitchen, younger than the scarred man, with dark curly hair and a thin mustache that looked like he'd drawn it on with Mama's eyebrow pencil. He carried a silver tray balanced on one hand, 3 wine glasses filled with liquid so red it looked black in the dim light. His other hand trembled slightly as he steadied the tray, and his eyes kept darting toward the back room like a rabbit watching for foxes. I'd seen that look before in Naples in the weeks before we left. On the faces of the neighbors who stopped talking when Mama walked past. On the man who'd come to our apartment and made Mama cry after he left. It was the look of people who were afraid. The waiter passed our booth, his dress shoes clicking against the hardwood floor in quick, nervous steps. Too quick. His foot caught the edge of the oriental rug that marked the transition from the main dining area to the private section, and everything happened in slow motion. His body lurched forward. The tray tilted. The wine glasses slid like ships on a tilting deck, and dark red wine arced through the air in droplets that caught the chandelier light like rubies before splashing across the pristine white tablecloth of the booth directly beside ours. Che cazzo. The curse exploded from the waiter's mouth in Sicilian dialect, harsh and guttural, the kind of bad word that would have gotten my mouth washed out with soap if I'd said it at home. The words left my mouth before my brain could catch them, automatic as breathing, in the Neapolitan Italian that lived in my bones even though I'd been speaking English for 3 years. Si dice, che cavallo, non si dice brutte parole. You say, che cavallo, you don't say bad words. The silence that followed wasn't gradual. It was immediate and absolute, like someone had thrown a switch and turned off all the sound in the world. The waiter froze mid-reach for his fallen tray, his face draining of color until he looked like one of the white marble statues in Central Park. The social worker's head snapped up from her phone, her eyes wide and confused. Even the voices from the back room stopped, cut off mid-sentence. I felt it before I saw it, the weight of attention turning toward me like a physical thing, heavy and dangerous and inescapable. My heart started hammering against my ribs, and I hugged Mr. Coniglio tighter, suddenly understanding why Mama had been so desperate, so terrified about me coming here. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Slow, measured, unhurried. The kind of walk that belonged to someone who'd never had to rush because the world waited for them, not the other way around. He emerged from the shadows like something carved from night itself. The gelato was pistachio, served in a crystal bowl that looked too fancy to eat from. Don Moretti had ordered it without asking what flavor I wanted, and somehow he'd chosen my favorite. The kind Papa used to buy from the vendor near our apartment in Naples, the one with the crooked smile who always gave me extra. Eat, Piccolina, he said softly, sitting across from me in the booth where the social worker had been. She'd been moved to a table near the door by the scarred man, Luca, after one quiet word from Don Moretti. Now she sat watching us with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in urgent whispers to someone about protocols and legal guardianship. I took a small bite. It tasted exactly right, creamy and sweet with tiny pieces of real pistachio. Thank you, I whispered. Your mother worked here how long? He asked in Italian, his voice gentle in a way that didn't match his stone face. 3 months. I swirled my spoon through the green gelato. She washes dishes. Chops vegetables sometimes. And before New York? Where did you live? I knew I shouldn't answer. Mama had rules about our past, about the things we never talked about, the names we never said. But something about his eyes, sad and dark like deep water, made the truth spill out. Boston. But before that, Naples. His hand tightened on the espresso cup he held, just slightly, but I noticed. What part of Naples? Quartiere Spagnoli. The Spanish Quarter, where the buildings leaned together like tired old friends and laundry hung between windows like flags of surrender. Luca appeared at Don Moretti's shoulder, silent as a ghost. He carried a manila folder and leaned down to whisper, but I heard it anyway. Stage 4 liver disease. She has weeks, maybe less, without immediate intervention. And Don. He hesitated. The photograph. Don Moretti took the folder, opened it, and went completely still. I watched his face transform, the stone cracking, something raw and wounded bleeding through. His finger traced the edge of whatever he was looking at, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. What was your father's name, Sophia? Antonio, I whispered. Antonio Benedetti. He turned the photograph around and I saw Papa, younger, smiling, his arm around a man I now recognized. Don Moretti, but different. Happier. Alive in a way the man across from me wasn't. He was my brother, Don Moretti said quietly. Not by blood but by choice. And I promised him I would protect his family. His hand reached across the table and I took it without thinking. I keep my promises, Stellina. Always. The funeral had been held in a church too small for the number of people who came. Vincenzo remembered standing in the rain, watching them lower Antonio into earth that turned to mud beneath his polished shoes. He'd worn black like everyone else, but unlike the others he hadn't cried. Not then. Not where anyone could see. Antonio's widow had stood across the grave, 6 months pregnant, her face hidden behind a veil that couldn't hide her shaking shoulders. She hadn't looked at Vincenzo once during the service. She knew. They all knew. The bullet meant for Vincenzo had found Antonio instead, because his blood brother had stepped between him and the gun without hesitation. I will protect what you loved, Vincenzo had whispered to the casket before they covered it. On my life, Fratello. On my soul. Now, 3 years later, he stood outside room 847 at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital, watching through the window as nurses adjusted 4 lines in a woman who looked nothing like the young wife from the funeral. Maria Benedetti had aged a decade in 3 years, her body wasted, her skin the color of old parchment. He pushed open the door. Her eyes found him immediately and recognition hit like lightning, widening, terrified, desperate. She tried to sit up but the tubes and weakness kept her pinned. No, she gasped in Italian. No, please, Vincenzo, not my daughter. Not Sophia. She's innocent, she knows nothing, please. Maria. He moved to her bedside, hands raised in peace. I'm not here to hurt her. You found us. Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks. I ran so far. Changed our names. Worked jobs where no one would look. And still, God, Antonio, I'm sorry I couldn't keep her safe. Your daughter spoke, Vincenzo said quietly, pulling a chair to her bedside. In the restaurant. In Neapolitan. She corrected a waiter's Sicilian with the voice of her father. Maria closed her eyes. I told her not to speak. I begged her. Children are not good at silence. He reached out, carefully taking her frail hand. Especially not children who carry their father's spirit. Maria, listen to me. I made Antonio a promise. I will keep it. By taking her into your world? She gripped his hand with surprising strength. She deserves normal. School, friends, birthday parties. She deserves to live, Vincenzo interrupted. The doctors say weeks without intervention. I've arranged a specialist. A transplant if needed. In exchange for what? Maria's voice broke. My daughter as collateral? In exchange for nothing. He met her eyes. Your daughter spoke and I listened. And I heard my brother's voice in hers. That's enough. The office above Ristorante Cesare smelled of leather and old cigar smoke. Vincenzo sat behind his mahogany desk while his captains filled the chairs across from him, their voices rising in argument like competing storms. The Benedetti girl is a gift from God, Carlo said, leaning forward with the eagerness of a hunting dog. We've lost 14 men to the Costantinos in 5 years. 14 funerals, Don Moretti. Their boss killed Antonio in front of witnesses and walked away clean. Now his daughter falls into our hands. Not our hands, Vincenzo said quietly. Mine. Semantics. Paolo, his cousin, waved a dismissive hand. The child is leverage. We send the Costantinos a photograph, a lock of hair, maybe a finger if they're slow to respond. Finish that sentence and I'll cut out your tongue. Vincenzo's voice remained calm, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Salvatore, his consigliere, cleared his throat. Don Moretti, perhaps we should consider the practical realities. Your enemies will see protection of Antonio's daughter as sentiment. Weakness. In our world, weakness invites challenges. Then let them come. Vincenzo lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. I've built this organization on fear for 5 years. The vulture they call me. The man who shows no mercy. He met each captain's eyes in turn. And what has it earned us? A war that bleeds us dry. Soldiers who follow orders but won't die for me the way Antonio did. Antonio died because he was soft, Carlo muttered. The room went silent. Vincenzo stood slowly, walked around the desk and grabbed Carlo by the throat, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Antonio died because he was loyal. Because he believed family meant something beyond fear and blood money. He died saving my life, you miserable piece of... He stopped, breathing hard, seeing his reflection in the window. A stranger looked back. Cold eyes. Hard mouth. The face of a man who'd forgotten how to be anything but the vulture. He released Carlo and stepped back. Sofia Benedetti is 7 years old. She corrects bad language and hugs a stuffed rabbit. When I look at her, I see what my brother died protecting. His voice quietened. I see who I was before I became this. And if the Constantinos find out she's here? Salvatore asked gently. Then I'll remind them what the vulture does to those who threaten children. Vincenzo turned back to the window. We're done here. Get out. They left in silence, and he was alone with the ghost of a better man. The package arrived at Ristorante Cesare wrapped in brown paper, addressed to the vulture, in block letters. Luca brought it to Vincenzo's office with gloved hands, his scarred face grim. Inside was a child's drawing, crude stick figures labeled Mama and Sofia, and a Polaroid photograph of the hospital where Maria lay recovering. Red X's marked the windows. Across the bottom, in the same block letters, surrender Benedetti's bastard or watch Brooklyn burn. You have 48 hours. Costantino. Vincenzo stared at the image until his vision blurred, rage building like pressure behind his eyes. Someone in his organization had talked. Someone had sold Sofia's location for Costantino silver. Find the rat, he said quietly. And when you do, make sure he understands the cost of betrayal before he dies. Already on it, Don Moretti. But the girl? Move them both. Tonight. The safe house in Red Hook, the one Antonio and I used during the Russo War. Vincenzo stood, already reaching for his coat. Full security detail. No one in or out without my personal authorization. 3 hours later, I sat in the back of a black SUV with tinted windows so dark I couldn't see the city passing by. Mama lay in the seat beside me, released from the hospital against medical advice, and 4 bag hanging from a hook above her head. She kept squeezing my hand like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. Don Moretti sat across from us, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone as he sent message after message. Finally he looked up and met my eyes. Sofia, do you know why your mother brought you to America? I shook my head. Because bad men wanted to hurt you to punish me for not saving your father. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your papa was my best friend. My brother in everything but blood. We grew up together in Naples, stole our first car together, built our first business together. His voice softened. He used to talk about you before you were born. Said he'd name his daughter after his grandmother, the strongest woman he ever knew. He knew I'd be a girl? He knew you'd be fierce. Don Moretti smiled, sad and small. Just like you were when you corrected that waiter. Your father would have laughed until he cried. Mama made a sound between a sob and a laugh. Antonio hated bad language. Especially in front of children. Don Moretti's smile faded. Those bad men found you, Stellina. But I promise you this, they will never touch you. Not while I breathe. The SUV pulled through gates that clanged shut behind us like prison doors, and I wondered if protection and captivity were really so different after all. I didn't speak for 3 days. Not to the nurses who checked on Mama, not to Luca who brought me coloring books, not even to Mama herself when she begged me to say something, anything just so she'd know I was okay. I wasn't okay. The safe house had bars on the windows disguised as decorative ironwork, and men with guns stood at every door. My bedroom was bigger than our entire apartment in Queens, but it felt like a cage lined with silk. On the 4th day, Don Moretti knocked on my door at bedtime. He didn't wait for permission, just came in carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate and sat on the floor beside where I hugged Mr. Caniglio on the window seat. Your father and I were 8 when we met. He began in Italian, the Neapolitan dialect that sounded like home. He punched me in the nose for stealing his soccer ball. Broke it too. We were best friends by sunset. I didn't look at him, but I listened. Antonio could make sfogliatelle that would make angels weep. Light as clouds, sweet as heaven. He'd wake up at 4 in the morning to get the pastry just right, layers so thin you could read through them. Don Moretti sipped his chocolate. He said cooking was like love, you had to pay attention to the small things or everything fell apart. Did he cook for me? My voice came out rusty from disuse. Every Sunday. Your mother was pregnant and he'd make her whatever she craved. Pickles and pasticciato. Gelato and gnocchi. Once at 3 in the morning, Napolitana pizza with pineapple. I almost smiled. That's gross. That's what I said. But love makes us do strange things. He set down his cup. Your father loved you before you were born, Stellina. Used to talk to your mother's belly in the evenings, reading you stories, singing old songs. Why did someone hurt my papa? The question burst out before I could stop it. Don Moretti's face went very still. Because I failed to protect him. Because bad men wanted to hurt me and your father stepped between us. Because in my world, good people pay the price for our sins. Is it your fault he's gone? Yes. His voice broke on the word. Every single day I live with that failure. But Sophia, I swear on everything holy, I will not fail you. Not ever. Your father saved my life. The least I can do is protect his. I set down Mr. Caniglio and crawled into his lap like he was Papa come back to life. And for the first time since the restaurant, I cried. Mama asked to see Don Moretti alone on the 10th day. I watched from the hallway as Luca wheeled in a camera on a tripod and recording equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. The nurse had given Mama something for the pain, and her eyes were clear for the first time in weeks, bright with a clarity that scared me more than the yellow ever had. Leave us, Mama told the nurse in English, then switched to Italian when Don Moretti entered. And closed the door. I pressed my ear to the crack they left. I'm dying, Vincenzo. We both know it. Mama's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. The transplant would take months I don't have. But I can still give you something valuable. Maria, you don't have to. The Constantinos killed Antonio in our apartment. Did you know that? Silence. Sophia was 3. Hiding in the bedroom closet where Antonio shoved her when they broke down the door. She watched through the slats while they shot him 6 times. They knew she was there. They laughed about it. Don Moretti's voice went cold as winter. I'll kill them all. No. You'll do something smarter. Rustling papers. I kept everything. Photographs of the crime scene. Text messages from Marco Constantino bragging about killing a man in front of his daughter. Evidence that they violated every code your world claims to honor. Why didn't you come to me before? Because I was terrified you'd use Sophia the same way they tried to. Mama's breath hitched. But she loves you now. Calls you Zio Enzo when she thinks I can't hear. And I've seen how you look at her, like Antonio lives again in her smile. He does. Then make me a promise, Vincenzo. On your brother's grave. Mama's voice strengthened. I'll record testimony. Give you everything you need to destroy the Constantinos politically, make the other families turn on them for breaking the old laws. But in exchange you adopt Sophia legally. Not as your ward, as your daughter. And you raise her away from all this. Normal schools. Normal life. No guns, no blood, no vengeance. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd refuse. She'll hate being normal after knowing you, Don Moretti finally said, and I heard the smile in his voice. She'll live. That's all that matters. Mama coughed, wet and rattling. Do we have a deal? We have a deal. On Antonio's grave, on my honor, Sophia will have the life her father dreamed for her. The camera clicked on, and Mama began to speak truth that would shatter kingdoms. The Church of Our Lady of Mount Carmel stood in Queens like a fortress of old stone and stained glass. Don Moretti held my hand as we walked up the steps, and I could feel his palms sweating even though his face showed nothing but calm. Remember what I told you, Stellina? He murmured in Italian. You stay beside me. You don't speak unless spoken to. And if anything feels wrong you run to Luca. Understand? I nodded, clutching Mr. Caniglio in my other hand. I'd wanted to leave him at the safe house, but Mama had insisted. Let them see you're a child, she'd whispered from her bed that morning. Let them remember what they've forgotten. Inside, the church basement had been transformed into a courtroom. Long tables formed a U-shape, and men in expensive suits filled every seat, old men mostly with faces like weathered stone and eyes that had seen too much. At the head table sat a man with white hair and a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw. He watched us enter with the cold patience of a snake. Don Moretti led me to the center of the U where 2 chairs waited. He helped me up onto mine so my feet didn't dangle, then stood beside me with one hand on my shoulder. Moretti, the scarred man said. You've called us here with promises of ending the 5-year war. Instead you bring a child to a commission meeting? I bring Antonio Benedetti's daughter to face the men who murdered her father in front of her. Don Moretti's voice carried through the basement like a church bell. Gentlemen of the commission, I present evidence of a violation so severe, it demands immediate judgment. He nodded to Luca who set up a laptop and projector. The lights dimmed. And Mama's face appeared on the white wall, 30 times larger than life. My name is Maria Benedetti, she began, her recorded voice steady and clear. 3 years ago, Marco Constantino and his men broke into my home and murdered my husband while our 3-year-old daughter watched from a bedroom closet. The room erupted in whispers. The scarred man, Don Constantino, half rose from his chair. This is lies. Silence. An ancient man at the far end raised one gnarled hand. Let the testimony continue. For 15 minutes, Mama spoke. She detailed dates, times, names. She described how they'd laughed while Antonio bled out, how they debated whether to kill the child too, how Marco had looked directly at the closet where I hid and said, "Let her live with the memory." When the video ended, the silence was absolute. Don Moretti squeezed my shoulder gently. The old laws are clear. We do not kill in front of children. We do not make war on innocents. We do not laugh at the suffering of families. His voice hardened. The Constantinos violated every code we claim to honor. They made Antonio's daughter witness her father's murder, then hunted her across the country like an animal. What do you want, Moretti? The ancient man asked. Peace. And protection. Don Moretti looked down at me and I saw love in his eyes, the kind Papa must have had. I offer the commission a truce. The war ends tonight. All debts settled, all grievances buried. In exchange, Sofia Benedetti is declared intouchable under my blood protection. Anyone who harms her answers to every family at this table. Don Constantino's face went purple. You'd shield Antonio's bastard. Call her that again, Don Moretti said quietly, and your blood will paint these church walls before you finish the sentence. The ancient man studied me for a long moment. Child, do you understand what's being discussed? I looked up at Don Moretti, then back at the commission. My papa died protecting people. Zio Enzo says that makes him a hero. I just want to be safe so I can remember him without being scared. Something shifted in the old man's face. He looked around the table. All in favor of granting intouchable status and ending the Moretti-Constantino war? Hands rose one by one. Even Don Constantino's captains voted against their boss, shame written across their faces. It's decided. The ancient man stood. The child is untouchable. The war is over. And Constantino, your family will tithe 20% to the Benedetti Memorial Fund for the next decade. Consider it penance. Don Moretti lifted me into his arms as we left, and I buried my face in his shoulder. Did Papa really die protecting people? I whispered. He died protecting me, Stellina. Which means he died so I could protect you. He kissed my forehead. And I will. For the rest of my life I will. Outside, snow had begun to fall, clean and white and pure. And for the first time since Mama got sick, I felt something like hope. The villa in Sorrento had lemon trees in the garden and a view of the sea that turned gold at sunset. Mama sat on the terrace in her wheelchair, color finally returning to her cheeks 6 months after the transplant, watching me practice my piano scales through the open French doors. I lived between two worlds now, the school in town where I was just Sofia, the quiet girl with perfect Italian and English and passable French, and the villa where men with guns stood at the gates and called me Signorina Moretti, with respectful nods. Vincenzo, Zio Enzo, as I'd started calling him after he legally adopted me, came every weekend from Naples, trading his dark suits for linen shirts and playing the role of doting uncle with an ease that surprised us both. Your hair is like your father's, he said that evening, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor while I knelt behind him on the bed. Thick as rope and just as stubborn. Then you need to braid it like Mama taught me. I divided his salt and pepper hair into sections, my small fingers working through the strands with concentration. Over, under, pull tight. See. Easy. He sat perfectly still, this man whose name made grown men tremble, while a 7-year-old gave him lopsided braids secured with pink elastic bands I'd gotten from school. Zio Enzo? I tugged gently to get his attention. Do you think my papa would be proud of me? I got all A's on my report card, and Signora Russo says my Italian composition was the best in class. His shoulders tensed, and when he turned to face me, I saw tears tracking down his scarred cheeks. Stellina, he said, his voice breaking on my nickname. Your father would be so proud his heart would burst. But he would also say something else. What? That I am the one who is blessed. He pulled me into his arms, braids and all. To know you, to watch you grow, to see Antonio live again in your kindness and your fierce heart, that is a gift I never deserved but will treasure every day I breathe. Through the doorway I could see Luca and 2 other guards watching us. Their faces showed confusion, the vulture brought low by pink hair elastics, but also something else. Something that looked like respect. Later Mama would tell me that Zio Enzo had found his purpose. That vengeance made men feared, but love made them remembered. I just knew that when he tucked me in that night, still wearing his ridiculous braids, he kissed my forehead 3 times like Papa used to do. And for the first time since I could remember, I felt safe enough to dream without nightmares.